I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, October 17th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Could we please have the roll?
Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Here.
Mayor First.
Here. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I am going to report out on two closed sessions that we had. The first was on October 3rd. We directed staff. There was nothing to report. The second closed session was on October 10th. Once again, we directed staff, and there is nothing to report. Next up is open time for public comment. This is the time in the meeting that we have set aside for members of the public to talk about something not on tonight's agenda. I think I see one person. If there's anybody else who would like to speak at open time, we do ask that you come up and speak at the lectern, state your name and where you live. Patty.
Good evening.
Hello. Patty Stolier, Casa Buena Drive, Age-Friendly Corte Madera. You know me. Two things. One is we have a wonderful senior fair that happens every May, but the county has a fantastic senior fair that's happening next Wednesday. So that is Wednesday from 9 to 3 up at the Civic Center, and I wanted everybody to know about that. And the other is I attended Dennis Rodoni's office hours the other day, and a lot of discussion about early alerts for disasters was had, and I wondered if we could just reiterate that for people that weren't there about how it happens in Corte Madera, especially with the fire in Sausalito. It became really relevant. So I wondered if you could maybe just say a couple words about that. Thank you.
Thank you. During town manager report, would you mind covering that? Thank you.
Good evening, Mitchell Marriott, 36 Staghound Passage. I'm here to kind of try to emphasize or accentuate or to highlight installing a pedestrian guardrail along Paradise Drive around the corner from Seawolf Passage in front of the fire or up to the fire department, and then around from Harbor Drive to San Clemente. I'm asking that town council members might go from 7:20 a.m. to 7:50 a.m. down to the corner of Seawolf Passage and Paradise and observe the kids and the cyclists and everything else that are trying to navigate that particular location. I think it represents a tremendous safety concern for my kids and for all the kids, and so I'm hoping that something can be done about it. I'm proposing, I gave some pictures, but just some general ideas of a simple guardrail that would keep pedestrians in, but also there's no place for pedestrians to escape. So if a car were not driving properly, texting or otherwise, and were to head towards people, there's nowhere to go in both of those locations. There's fences there that block you from trying to even avoid a car for whatever reason. So my hope is that could happen. I have attended the BPAC meetings numerous times to get a more comprehensive solution. I know there are more comprehensive solutions in the works, but what I'm hoping for is a very well needed, inexpensive fix to something. And I know there's lots of rules to getting something done, but when you have something fixing, like if somebody were to knock off a fire hydrant and the water would go up in the air somehow, the fire department and others would show up for that. So, I mean, what does it qualify to be in that category versus to be in a category where nothing gets done forever until something's done really nicely, but nothing gets done for 11 years now? This has been a concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. That segment of sidewalk is actually one of the projects that we are currently undertaking. Do you recall what the timeline is on that one, Todd? Next 12 to 18 months. And unfortunately, there is no inexpensive solution there. It's going to be a little involved, but it's definitely on our list of areas to address. So, but thank you. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak at open time? All right, seeing none, we will move on to presentations. This is the time that we honor Pauline. We do this every year because Pauline has been a community member here for, let's see, how many years have you lived in Corte Madera, Pauline?
Since 1958,
Since 1958.
22nd of March.
22nd of March, she remembers the date. We have a certificate of honor for Pauline in recognition of and appreciation for her admirable and exemplary contributions to the community of Corte Madera. On the celebration of her 109th birthday, we honor Pauline for her long life and prosperity and offer our best wishes for continued good health and happiness from the Town Council in the town of Corte Madera. Now it's official. We already got the photo out of the way, but congratulations. Would you like to say a few words? Okay. If you want to sit, I'll hand you the microphone.
Okay, then.
Okay.
Well, first thing I want to do is certainly thank you for all this. I have one or more to go with it. You folks, it's getting to be such a habit that I don't know what to say so much of the time because people have been so nice to me. No, we came here in 1958. We really didn't know just how, we lived in San Francisco before my husband went into the Army, and we had been into Marin, but this was sort of a, what do you call the area? It wasn't built up, built up. It was, swamp mostly. It was
We like to call it marsh.
Well, it was, because I live down on Birch, in case I think everybody knows where I live. But across the canal from me, when we moved in there, not too long after that, they started building a park across the way, and they built it up. And how does anyone know how they settled that thing? They used it as a place to train the semi-truck drivers. Sometimes those trucks would go round and round and round out there, but they certainly made a good job of it. And no, it's been wonderful being here in Corte Madera. And I've seen it grow from back in the 30s, really, is when it was, when I first saw it. And to now, I have to say that I think this is one of the nicest towns in the whole of California for the streets, the upkeep of the town, and, it's just a good place to live. And everyone has been so nice, and I belong to practically everything, and I enjoy everything. And I do hope that I can spend a few more years, because I can find a couple of places for a few more years. And, well, I'll go down to hang on Scott and Carl's house if I lose space. But anyway, thank you so much for honoring me for this, because I do feel honored.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And cake looks beautiful.
And we've got cake, so sit down and I will serve you. All right, let's move on to the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to group items together which are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. They will be approved by a single motion. Any member of the town council, staff, or the public may request removal of an item for discussion. Would anybody like to remove any item from the consent calendar?
I move that we approve items 4.1I through 4.19.
Second that.
I think Bob got that second.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Yes.
Mayor First.
Yes. Thank you. Let's move on to business items. We have business item 6.1. There are two sub-items. These are related to the moratorium on cannabis-related business activities. The first one is consideration and possible approval of Resolution 52/2017, accepting a report describing measures taken to alleviate the conditions that led to the adoption of ordinance number 971. And the second one is consideration and possible adoption of ordinance number 972, extending the moratorium for an additional 10 months and 15 days. Adam Wolf, our planning
Thank
director.
you, yes. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you mentioned, we are here tonight to discuss two different items. One is the mandated report that is issued by the town with respect to the efforts that we have made to alleviate the conditions which led to the adoption of the first urgency ordinance, which was, as you recall, adopted by the council on September 19th, 2017, which imposed the urgency ordinance for 45 days on all operation and location of medical and non-medical cannabis-related businesses in the town of Corte Madera. That report is in your packet under attachment 1. It's actually an exhibit to the resolution which we have prepared for you with respect to basically in accordance with California Government Code Section 65858 subsection D. And the report generally describes, obviously, in a short amount of time that we had between the last meeting in September, or September 19th, and now. Obviously, at this point, we're in sort of the research mode of investigating further sort of the industry that's being created, sort of talking with other colleagues and so on about the legislation and what we can expect from potential, how the market might react to this legislation and respond. So that report is there. It's dated October 12th. That
Thank you.
is the first part of this agenda item. And we are requesting that it's for the council consider and potentially approve Resolution 15, 2017, /2017. The second part of the agenda, which actually was noticed as a public hearing, and I think for the purposes of tonight should be opened as a public hearing, in accordance with the California Government Code, is for the extension of ordinance number 971 for an additional 10 months and 15 days. In order to do that, the council needs to adopt, again, by a 4/5 vote, another urgency ordinance, and that's included in your in the staff report as draft ordinance number 972. That's attachment 2 again, which would in fact extend the urgency ordinance for another 10 months and 15 days, or until September 18th, 2018. And obviously that would give staff the requisite, we believe, the requisite amount of time to go ahead and conduct the necessary public hearings and workshops with the Planning Commission, ultimately bring that back in the form of new zoning amendments and potentially other regulations to the council for formal adoption. So those are the two items. We are urgency ordinance numbers 972, and again, approve resolution 52/2017. And if we need to, we would do those as separate votes.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
It's just a technical question, Adam or Teresa, I don't know. I thought with ordinances we had to do 2 readings or something, no?
Yes, ordinarily you do. If you adopt an ordinance as a regular ordinance, this is being adopted as an urgency ordinance. So there's only one action. There is no 30-day waiting period. It takes effect immediately upon adoption. This particular type of ordinance, the procedure is prescribed step by step in the government code section cited in the staff report. And so this particular type of an urgency ordinance is a moratorium that would apply when you need time to develop or adopt zoning regulations or a zoning text amendment. It essentially freezes the status quo until you can go ahead and do that.
Thank you for that concise answer.
Any other questions? Adam, I'm wondering if you can just give us the 30-second kind of big picture view for those members of the public who might not have seen or listened to our previous meeting on this. What has changed at the state level, and why are we revisiting this issue and doing this moratorium while we come up with our own policies?
Sure. Well, obviously, big picture back in the fall of last year, I guess November of 2016, Proposition 64 was passed, allowing for legal adult use for marijuana. In the subsequent year, the state has come up with specific licensing requirements or a process by which businesses could be licensed by the state to all facets. I believe we talked about this last time. There's about 19 different business licenses that could be issued, everything from cultivation to sale of both medical and non-medical marijuana. So they've consolidated the medical and non-medical licensing process. Because of that, the licenses are expected to be issued starting in January. And because of that, many jurisdictions are now in the process or have been of considering how to adopt regulations that would apply in each local jurisdiction, and the local jurisdictions retain that ability to do that under the state law, with the one exception being personal cultivation of non-medical marijuana indoors. And so we've, as we talked about at the last meeting, and even at the workshop before that in August, when we had our first meeting on this, had noted that we would need some additional time to think through some of the issues related to either not allowing or prohibiting commercial businesses, or potentially allowing some of those. But we definitely wanted to have a more robust conversation with the public at the Planning Commission level before deciding on permanent regulations. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, it's just, I guess, concise, just to reiterate and be concise, the prohibition is on the business aspect or commercial business licenses in the town of Corte Madera. So no medical or non-medical marijuana, cannabis-related businesses would be allowed in Corte Madera during the time of the moratorium.
Okay. And as the town works to develop its policies, the public will still have plenty of opportunity to
Absolutely.
provide input.
And in the meantime, the things that aren't subject to this moratorium are the personal cultivation up to the limits allowed by the state law, and the mobile deliveries for businesses that are located outside of the town to specific locations or residents or customers in Corte Madera.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this item?
I would just remind the mayor that we have two items here. The first item is adoption of the resolution, which would essentially accept the report from staff as required under the government code section. The second item is to adopt on an urgency basis an ordinance extending the original moratorium. That second item does need to be opened as a public hearing. It has been noticed as a public hearing, and so if you want to take those two separately, you could do that, or you could open the public hearing now and take public comment as to both of those items.
Thank you. Then I will,
Oh, I did have a question. Is it too late?
can it wait till after public comment?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
I'm going to open the public hearing for both of these, and accept public comment on both of these items. The first one, again, is possible approval of Resolution 52/2017. The second one is a public hearing, and it's possible adoption of ordinance number 972. Jane?
Good evening, council members. Jane Levinson, and you know where I live. And you know what my position is on this subject also, and I'm not going to take very much time going into it because we still have time, as I understand it, to talk about it again. But I don't know how many of you saw 60 Minutes Sunday night with the pharmaceutical companies having a huge hand in this senior moment, opioid problem that we're having in this country. And they knew what they were doing, and they knew how to do it, and they knew what they wanted to do. And until bodies of government like ours don't nip all this in, and I'm, excuse the expression, in the bud, we're going to have a problem with marijuana here too. And so I'm just saying that the people who are dispensing it, and I hate that word, they're not pharmacists. They're just kids who decided a long time ago that they love marijuana. They see money being made in it, and it's a cash cow. And this is going to, and the tobacco, I've been in this tobacco thing for years, since '65, as you know. The tobacco growers they're chomping at the bit to get some land to start growing marijuana, as is other organizations too. And we're going to rue the day that we made this a recreational drug. I mean, it's madness. And so I'm just putting in my 2 cents worth in now and saying that whatever we can do to keep the stuff out of here. One thing I heard in the fires, that growers, because they're not insured, because they can't be, because of the federal law, they lost millions and millions of dollars because they kept the cash in their homes. And when the homes burned down, the cash burned up. And I'm very delighted about all of that. And as far as the crops themselves, I don't know whether they were harmed by the fire or not. Apparently grapes can survive. I don't know about marijuana. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there? Yeah. Okay. By the way, we have a new little timer that shows up on the screen in the corner. Every speaker has 3 minutes, and you can see the progression of the red as it moves across the box.
Hi, I'm Laura Bertoli, and I represent Marin 420 Citizens Group. I'm going to all the council meetings and trying to talk a little bit of reason into this. This is coming. This is something that, like alcohol was, during Prohibition, it just came out of Prohibition, and now that's where we are with cannabis. We're in the coming out of Prohibition. So I would like to encourage you to think about legitimizing this and taxing it. So you're losing out on some tax dollars right now. I just read today that I'm glad she brought up the opioid war, in Denver, ODs from opiates are down 6.5% because marijuana is available. In fact, they've proven that cannabis can help fight the opioid war. It helps veterans treat PTSD. It helps cancer patients going through chemo, and it does shrink cancer. It helps Parkinson's clients. It helps epilepsy and seizures. It helps people sleep, relax. and it helps against headaches and migraines. I think the sooner that we start regulating this and allowing it to be legal, the sooner the black market goes away. So this is something that if we want youth to stay away from it, we need to get it out of the hands of the black market. And as soon as things are regulated, people like us who want to try it will go to a regular dispensary and outlet to buy it, and those people will lose their clients. So that'll get rid of the black market. I would like to recommend also that what San Anselmo just did the other night is they put a clause in that they would, on a case-by-case basis, look at conditional use permits on like certain people that might be professional in your area that you would trust to do this, and maybe put a clause in your ordinance tonight that says we will look at a case-by-case basis, because really what people want, let the market decide instead of kind of top-heavy coming down. So that's all I have to say right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this item? Okay, Carla, did you want to
Yeah,
ask something?
I just had a quick question. On one of our attachments, the ordinance 972, on page 2 at the top of the page, the first whereas at the top of the page, it says that currently we prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries within the town boundaries as such uses are defined in the town zoning ordinance, but does not currently expressly prohibit non-medical marijuana dispensaries or any other business related to medical or non-medical cannabis from operating in the town. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So this gets to the, we had actually discussed this, I think it was early January 2016 when we talked about our permissive zoning ordinance and the fact that we basically, we say because non-medical cannabis businesses are not listed as a permitted use in our zoning ordinance, we say that it's not allowed. But there's a difference between that, and this is where the league is recommending that we do not rely on that as a prohibition, that would prohibit a non-medical cannabis business from operating in the town, that we actually need to expressly prohibit such business in our zoning ordinance if we want to actually prohibit that use.
Okay, because I guess what I don't understand is where it says we prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries, but then if you go down to the third line.
Yes.
Or no, the fourth line, it says.
It's non-medical, right?
Right, it doesn't currently prohibit any other business related to medical or non-medical cannabis.
Right.
And
So
I mean, to me, that's, it's contradictory. One, it says we prohibit medical marijuana dispensary, and the other one says related to medical cannabis from operating.
So
that we don't have something.
I think what the difference that we're trying to communicate in that clause is that there's medical marijuana dispensaries, which we already prohibit. We say we do not currently expressly prohibit non-medical marijuana dispensaries, but then there are those 18 other businesses related to both medical and non-medical cannabis from operate. That is what that second part relates to. So there's other businesses that we don't have any regulations in our current ordinances or in our code that talk to those other uses.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It just, to me, it's really kind of cloudy wording to say any other business related to medical cannabis, when you just said we prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries, and then in the next sentence, it says we don't prohibit medical cannabis.
Right, he's talking about three different things here. Medical dispensaries, non-medical dispensaries, and any other kind of non-dispensary business related to marijuana.
I see that, but what I'm saying is that I think that maybe the language could be modified just so that there isn't, essentially saying the same thing.
May I ask?
Unless you list the 18 things.
Actually, I have another question about that paragraph, if I might. Didn't we prohibit all of those under ordinance 971?
That's what I thought.
This ordinance simply extends the ordinance 971 for an additional period of time. The scope of this ordinance is identical, and that whereas clause was cut and paste from the original 971. I think that I can, with about another 30 seconds, come up with a suggestion that might address your concern and make it clear that the only express prohibition that you currently have with respect to cannabis businesses is as to medical cannabis dispensaries. And so if you give me just a moment, I can maybe propose something that would make it feel clearer. But that paragraph was contained in the original. The operative provisions of this, again, I will just say it to be very clear, are exactly the same. The scope is exactly the same. The only thing that this ordinance does is it extends the period of time that the original moratorium is in place. The government code, as I mentioned before, has a very specific structure for how you can adopt an ordinance that is a zoning moratorium and only allows you to do so for an initial 45 days. You have to come back in a public hearing in order to extend it for another up to 10 months and 15 days. So that's what we're doing here.
Okay, so in this paragraph, we also don't need to acknowledge that 971 did prohibit
For 45 days.
all of them temporarily?
This, at the top of page 3 of the proposed ordinance, the first whereas paragraph. I will go ahead and read it out loud. Whereas on September 19th, 2017, the Town Council of Corte Madera adopted urgency ordinance, Corte Madera Ordinance Number 971, pursuant to California Government Code Section 65858, temporarily prohibiting all medical and non-medical cannabis-related businesses from locating and operating in the town of Corte Madera, pending the analysis and consideration of new zoning amendments and other regulations appropriate for this new industry. Ordinance 971 was to remain in effect for 45 days from its adoption until November 3rd, 2017.
Okay, that's fine, good enough for me. 30 seconds?
Okay, do you want me to do the rewrite?
Yeah,
Okay.
it just bothers me, that wording.
Any other questions? Any other member of the public want to speak to this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Anybody want to start?
Ready to make a motion to the first one.
Well, let's wait for 30 seconds
Okay.
till we get some proper language. Anybody have anything to say in the meantime?
Well, we've got a resolution we could pass.
Yeah.
All
what I
right,
was-
you want to,
I'll move that we approve Resolution 52/2017, accepting a report describing measures taken to alleviate the conditions that led to the adoption of ordinance number 971.
I'll second it. Okay.
Bob got the second?
I got you. I'll do the next one.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Yes.
Mayor First.
Yes.
It's fun watching her in action. Usually she's doing that for my documents and to see her go.
Okay, what I would suggest is to replace the whereas clause at the top of page 2, the first whereas clause, with whereas, comma, currently, the only cannabis-related business type expressly prohibited in the town zoning ordinance is medical marijuana dispensaries.
But Diane, I agree with you that I thought we had, the non-medical cannabis was not legal, but it was kind of an across-the-board thing.
Under 971.
This is a
So-
zoning ordinance.
So this paragraph I have, my suggested language says the only type we expressly prohibit.
Got it, okay.
There is under the permissive zoning ordinance principle that we have here in the town. If there is a use that is not allowed under your current zoning ordinance, it is banned. And that's, again, under the permissive zoning ordinance. The difficulty here is that the league is strongly urging cities not to rely on permissive zoning because there is an argument and there is some litigation that's currently happening in other jurisdictions that really are getting at this issue of, well, there wasn't an express ban, and the argument is that it's close enough to something else that you do allow. And so what this moratorium does is it removes that argument entirely, allows you the time to create a more permanent zoning structure here without subjecting yourself to that type of argument and potentially that type of litigation.
So in other words, that after our moratorium period is over, then we can vet through all the alternatives and decide if there are permanent bans on all the 18 things you mentioned.
You're going to do that while your moratorium is still in effect.
Right,
So
that it's done before the time is up.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the state law does allow, I don't think staff is anticipating that you will need to do it, but if the process ends up being slower than anticipated, state law would allow you to come back next year and extend for one additional year the moratorium if you still need additional time to sort through what your permanent zoning ordinance and regulation might look like. So at this point, the most we can do is another 10 months and 15 days, but there is an opportunity for one more year if you need it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll move that we adopt ordinance number 972, extending for an additional 10 months and 15 days, ordinance number 971, imposing a temporary prohibition on medical and non-medical cannabis-related businesses from locating and operating in the town of Corte Madera, pending the analysis and consideration of new zoning amendments and other regulations appropriate for this new industry,
Do add the rewording.
Second.
as modified by our town attorney and discussed hereto.
Okay, I'll second it.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Yes.
Mayor First.
Yes. And I do just want to remind you, this is a temporary moratorium while we work through the town's policies. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item 6.2, consideration and possible action to approve a single publicly available pay schedule for all town employees to comply with PERS.
Thank you.
CalPERS.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is a house cleaning item for us and required by CalPERS. And this resolution before you, if approved, will allow the town to comply with the California Public Employee Retirement System CalPERS regulations requiring a single publicly available pay schedule for all town employees. The council will not be considering any changes to our current salary levels. And again, currently the information contained in the attached salary schedule is available in our SEIU contract and various town resolutions and contracts. However, CalPERS regulations requires that all of this information be included in one document. The attached document will meet CalPERS requirements, and if approved, staff will place this resolution on our town's website available to the public. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No.
Jim?
Let me see. On a go-forward basis, would it be possible to include a copy of this schedule and required resolution whenever we have a item where we're voting on changing pay schedules or job titles, just from a regular housekeeping standpoint?
I think that is a good recommendation and practice moving forward, and we will do that. Yes. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question. I thought the mayor got $350.
So
Yeah.
so the mayor does. So the mayor gets an extra
Yeah.
$50 stipend for various meetings that they attend, but this is only CalPERS items. So the $50 does not go to retirement.
I did not vote to demote
So-
your salary. That was somebody
Yeah.
else.
You sure?
Yes.
All right, any other questions? Would any member of the public like to speak to this? See none, I will bring it back. Anybody,
I'll move to approve single publicly available pay schedule for all town employee positions to bring the town into compliance with California Public Employee Retirement System, CalPERS regulations.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Condon.
Yes.
Mayor First.
yes. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6.3, consideration of proposed revisions to the Corte Madera Town Council rules and procedures.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The town clerk, town attorney, and myself will attempt to walk you through, again, this item. This is a follow-up from our August 1st, 2017 council meeting where we went over the council rules and procedures, and we were provided feedback by the council, and this document does reflect that. It also reflects some additional changes that we'll walk you through. And as you can see, we have a clean version, which probably isn't very helpful on the changes. The red line version will tell you the extent that really what was necessary to modify this document. So again, on page on page 2, I'm sorry, we again give an overview on page 2 and 3 of the changes and the discussion from our August 1st meeting. And just really briefly, section 3.3, that was the language, and we discussed open time, and the council directed that open time should stay as is, to restrict speakers to a 3-minute limit. But also allowing the mayor discretion given to allow more time during public hearings or business items as the need arises, so it allows some flexibility for us. Section 4.1, again, we discussed the rules of order, and the most recently revised edition of the Rosenberg's Rules of Order was recommended. Section 5.1 speaks to the start time, and we've already begun that. We start our meetings now at 6:30, but also we would now put in place a hard stop time of 9:30 with the option to extend by half-an-hour increments with a majority vote required to continue to 10 o'clock and a unanimous vote to move beyond 10 o'clock. Closed session can be set at the beginning or the end of the meetings. We do have a council member or two that may have difficulty getting to closed sessions before the 6:30 start time. So as a practice, we are holding our closed sessions at the end of council meetings. Section 7.1 speaks to the order of business. We have begun this transition on our 1 through 9 items from start time to adjournment. We have been doing that the last few meetings since the August 1st meeting. It seems to have been going well, but we're interested to know what the council thinks with that. Section 6.5, basically the public hearings puts in place really the practice that we have been following the last 2 years, and it seems to have been working well for us. Section 7.5, this is a new item that the town attorney and I placed on here. It has to do with placing an item on the agenda. The town council will be asked to provide direction, or is being asked to provide direction to staff regarding this section should changes be warranted. Current practice is to have the requester work through staff and the town manager, who may bring the mayor into the discussion if necessary. As a practice, we do bring the mayor into the discussion at the start of the conversation in order to determine if mutually agreeable resolution can be achieved prior to bringing any item for a council meeting. So really our intent is if a member of the public wants an item placed on an agenda because of an issue, at first we're going to try to work immediately and expeditiously with that community member to see if we can solve that without taking it to a council meeting. But if we can't, we will work with staff and the mayor to place it on an upcoming meeting. Currently, if you read the language, and Teresa, please jump in here, it's a little bit, right now I think anybody can put something on the agenda and it has to go on in the next 22 days, I believe. And that is problematic for running the business of the town, especially with time requirements on our agendas. So there's some discussion to be had definitely in section 7.5. Section 7.9 adjournment, it was revised to reflect the change under section 5.1, pending the adoption of the ordinance to change the start time and regular town council meetings, and if we decide that they will also end at 9:30. Section 8.3, some discussion for the council, and I believe there are some recommendations in the language there on the red line version, but currently the town attorney approves all resolutions, all contracts, all documents. And just in discussions with the town attorney and the town manager, we are recommending some leeway there of discussion between the two of us on what should be approved or not. I mean, sometimes we have resolutions that really don't need, I don't think, legal advisement. Obviously, all ordinances should be required. Many of our resolutions, as a practice recently, we moved one of our contracts with Tyler Financial Systems. We actually went through the risk pool for that. And so to allow some flexibility for staff on what documents are reviewed and how that process should take place. And again, you'll see a lot of red line versions. We replaced, Teresa helped us replace a lot of outdated information throughout our document. And with that, I know it's a lot of information, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sloan, did you have some questions?
I do. I don't know, maybe you already had the plan to do this in some way, Todd or Teresa. I don't see that language that you discussed under 7.5 in the red line version. Maybe it's there and I'm not seeing it, but I don't. It says it's consolidated with 7.4, and then if you go through 7.4, I don't see anything about sort of the gist. By the way, I'm totally content with what you're suggesting, Todd. I just don't see it in there.
Okay, let's see. Did I confuse 7.5 with?
No, you have the right thing. It's just, it's not physically in there, I don't think.
I think the part that is in there is not pertaining to the public, but is pertaining to other council members. So 7.5 says any person may request an item to be placed on the agenda. And what we moved was, we moved that concept and made it a council member may raise it at the time that the agenda for the next meeting is being reviewed. And there is a place on the agenda to raise potential items for future meetings, and then council by motion could direct staff to bring that forward at a time that is appropriate, given other priorities and given how much work it takes to sort of, how big is the lift to bring it back. The rule does not discuss members of the public. Members of the public, what I'm understanding from the town manager, however, is that he endeavors to, when he gets a request from a member of the public, to work with the mayor to try to bring it forward. Members of the public certainly also can stand up during public comment and ask, if they haven't come to the town manager to make the request, ask that the council consider putting an item on a future agenda. And at that point in time, council would be able to discuss it. The difficulty with Rule 7.5 as it's written is it would allow essentially either one council member to, perhaps against the wishes of the majority, to demand that staff bring forward an item and put it on the agenda at a future meeting. And there's a very tight time frame under this rule for doing so, and the only way to get out of it is to actually have the person who made the request grant you an extension, essentially. That's certainly not, I've never seen anything like that before, and in my view, it would allow either a single council member or a member of the public to perhaps trump the priorities that are being set by the council. And so the rewrite would allow members of council a time on the agenda to raise an issue that hasn't already been raised, and to have a brief discussion about whether that item should be agendized for a future meeting or not. And so, but you are correct that the the process of staff working with the public and then bringing in the mayor, that is not reflected in this rule. And so if you wanted to formalize that process, then that would need to be added to the rule.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean,
Oh.
it made sense to me the way that you described it. I'd rather have it in there so that we have it. I have a couple other comments. Do you want to, I mean, can I make them now, or how do you want to organize this?
Well, let's do questions first, then
Okay.
we'll open it to public comment, and
Okay.
then we'll bring it back and hash it out.
Okay.
Okay?
I'll hold then.
Okay, Carla.
Thank you. Is there a specific regulation, when you mentioned the 20-some-odd days or whatever, that, that we're supposed to abide by? What is the language there if somebody from the public comes forth?
So the rule in the council rules doesn't make a distinction. It just says an item may be placed on the agenda by submitting a request to the clerk or the town manager or their designee by, and then it gives a deadline. And it's at least 21 or not less than 21 days prior to the council meeting during which the item is sought to be considered. So it doesn't call out member of the public or council member. It just says, essentially, it just says that requests can be submitted. One interpretation of that would be members of the public could submit the request. As I'm understanding it, that is perhaps historically what has been done. The 21 days is drafted into your current rules. The 21 days, I think, is very problematic because there are many items that couldn't be brought forward within 21 days. I'm going to just use an example that certainly hasn't been addressed here, but for example, if a tenant were to say, we really need a rent control ordinance, I would like you to have it and bring it back in 21 days. Drafting a rent control ordinance is an enormous lift. And that is not something that can be done within 21 days. So that's a very extreme example. Not every request is that extreme, but even if it's a request that could be done within 21 days, it could be that staffing limitations, holiday scheduling, your own calendar, and perhaps really pressing priorities that the council has set would need to be weighed in terms of when staff could bring back another request.
Where did the 21 days come from?
I have no idea. It's
I mean,
not-
that's just something that we had in our rules, but
Yes.
it's not a,
It's not mandated anywhere, and I've never seen it before. I mean, I've seen it in your rules before, but I haven't seen it elsewhere. And in my mind, that ties your hands too much and gives too much control over a single requester, potentially against the will of the majority of council. So I would recommend that, if nothing else, that piece of it get amended out. And I think it's very difficult for staff to then be in the position of having someone who points to a rule and says, well, you're supposed to do this within 21 days, and it's really important to me that you bring it within 21 days. That person may not understand everything, all of the other priorities that staff is trying to balance.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? See none, I will open up for public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this? See none, let's bring it back for discussion. Sloan, you said you had a few things?
Just it's not going to take long, guys. I am in favor of the concept here, Todd, or Diane, the idea that essentially Todd enjoys very broad discretion and consultation with you and the town attorney and the town clerk to figure out what's on the agenda. That's kind of like, to my mind, ought to be the source of how the agenda's done. But then there's two other groups here, members of the public and then the rest of town council. I think the rest of the town council, I don't know what the protocol you have in here or the way you've suggested it sounds fine to me. The only one that, to my mind, remains kind of outstanding, and I sort of like the way you described it, Todd, but I think it would make sense to have it both in our rules, and secondly, maybe more importantly, in a prominent, straightforward way on our website or available to the public, is that if you're a member of the public and you want something on the agenda, that your first resource ought to be go to Todd and say, I'd like it on the agenda. If you don't get satisfaction, or he can't make it happen, or whatever, you're entitled to come to public open time and say, hey, you sons of a gun, I'd like this thing on the agenda. and then the whole universe hears it, and it's a matter of public record. But that procedure, I think, ought to be made clear in a straightforward way to members of the public, because we, obviously, I don't want to proselytize, but we have an obligation to let people be heard. And we ought to be clear to them how they get heard. Not just their 3 minutes, but how they can have a formal consideration where the five of us can exchange ideas and comments. So, number one, I would insert within the rules, the way you described it, Todd, sounded fine to me. Number two, I would supplement what's in our rules by something on the website, Rebecca, I'm sorry, it's probably for you to figure out, in some clear, straightforward way. Frankly, probably on the first page of our website saying, if you want the town council to consider something, or you want the town to consider something, click here, and then you can go to another page, it'll describe it or something. You know what I mean? Like, how do I, whatever. And then the third thing is, I would suggest one of you three ought to have, maybe you do already, Rosenberg's rules at every meeting. Just a copy, it's a pamphlet, I think it costs about $5, and just have it physically here. We have rarely had that issue, but I can imagine that we would occasionally need to consult it, and then our town attorney may not always be here. I would like to have that reference within an arm's reach.
You could also put a link on the website so that everyone could see the rules, so it's not very voluminous. I do carry it in my binder.
Great.
I do carry it in my binder, but you could also, I can send you a link. You could just put it right on the website.
Those are my comments.
Thank you. Anybody else? Tim?
2.2, the revote on naming the mayor and the vice mayor being in July, that presupposes that the primary elections will occur in June, but we're going to be shifting back and forth between March and June. Is that I'm not certain we should make that change until we figure out, or Sacramento figures out what's going on in terms of when the elections will be. I do like the one-year turnover. Also, in terms of budgeting, will changing mayors around that time cause any problems in terms of the budget cycle?
I mean, it could. I think we have our finance subcommittee in place with you and Diane, and so I think that's the most strategic and sets us up for success that way. But it does bring in, it's a good point of, we currently have an election coming up, this coming June, and then we also know we have the November 2019 election, depending on if we make any additional changes or what the state does. And so I think we need to be a little bit flexible with this area, and we also need to consider what we do between now and the June election. So.
One thought I did have is if your practice is to reconstitute or reset your committees after there's a changeover with your mayor, you could end up with a different constitution for your budget committee. So I just wanted to raise that flag. It is possible, as the note on page 6, this is the note that's in the column on the far right, and this note was from me, that there are really two ways to go. One is to extend the current term or provide for a shortened term. You could do that by a rule change. Again, we have a date issue that you flagged. The other way would be to amend the rule. I'm sorry, rather than amending the rule, leave the rule alone and suspend the rule. You have a procedure for suspending your rules, and so you could do that at the time later on and decide to suspend the rule, but you would need to go, even if you did it as a rule suspension for a particular appointment of a mayor, you would need to decide whether what you're doing is lengthening a term or shortening a term. Fundamentally, that's your option.
Is that something that we decide tonight?
If you want it to go in your rules, then if you could give us some guidance about which direction you would like to go, and then maybe we can draft it in a way that we don't have to commit to the exact term, but that it can be driven by whatever the state law deadline is. I think I can probably draft something, and then you'll see it next time we bring it back, and if you don't like it, we can tinker with it. But I think staff needs some direction about, would you like to see it changed in the rules now? And if so, we would need to know what concept you would like. If you don't want to address it, but want to move forward with this, then you're going to be in a position of suspending your rules. And to suspend your rules, let me just look.
Let's say we,
Teresa, are we talking only about the term for this kind of odd year for the mayor? Okay, I have a suggestion, and Teresa, you can answer this question, I think, which wouldn't require us to make some kind of permanent amendment for this very temporal problem.
Claim it.
Who is it?
I don't claim it.
So I think that this can address the situation, but, and maybe the answer's simple, and the suspension of rules does it. What rule is it in here that allows us to handle the unanticipated situation? So not just some weirdness with the mayor, but isn't there some general authority whereby when we confront weirdness, the five of us can vote to do something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'd like to clarify when you said the weirdness with the mayor, you're talking about the weirdness
Timing
of the
election.
mayoral
Yes.
term.
Yes,
but
that is
not
on the nose,
the mayor.
on the nose. That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
It's the seat, not who's filling
Right.
the seat, right? Okay, so, yes, if you turn to page 16 of the red line version, which is Rule 10.1, suspension of the rules, you can suspend your rules by majority vote. The only change is that if you're going to suspend the rule to extend the regular meeting beyond 10 p.m., the vote to suspend the rule, you would need the unanimous vote. Under these rules, you would need a unanimous vote to do that.
But this would allow us then, under the suspension and amendment of rules provision, or a suspension of rules, to sort of on an ad hoc basis, if we have a timing thing we're trying to cure, to simply say, in this one situation, why don't we just do that? To me,
Yes.
that makes a lot more sense than a permanent change to what our rules and procedures are for something that is pretty specific, right?
Yes, you could,
you're concentrating on the upcoming 6 months
Yes.
period. Any council person who's elected in the presidential year,
Yeah.
Sacramento is playing with their term of office the way Lawrence Welk played in an accordion. Okay? And so- frequently and in and out. Okay? Right now they've moved the primary from June to March. Okay? In the past, they've done that, and then they said, wait, we like running for our offices in June, so.
I mean, but to answer that, my own suggestion would be to enact some procedure that provides flexibility, rather than trying to specifically decide this one thing. That'd be my preference. Is that already done on the way you've got it here?
Rule 10.1, it already exists, and there were no proposed changes to Rule 10.1.
Okay.
So you can, and this goes to any rule. So for example,
Right, that was my point. So
You
I would
have
say,
a-
instead of trying to retool the one about the mayor's term, let's leave it alone and stick with 10.1 to fix that problem when we come to it.
So what do we put, what do you recommend we put up in, where is that?
2.3?
2.3.
If you're going to deal with it later.
Yes.
By suspending your rules as needed, then I would suggest then that my comment will just delete and you leave it as it is.
That would be my
We
suggestion.
didn't make a change, we just, I just flagged the issue.
Thank you. Do you
Okay.
foresee,
So
I'm
it's
sorry,
just-
one other question, Diane? Do you
Yes.
foresee any problem with this style?
The only issue is, you might want to think about your timing for coming back and making this decision, if, to the extent it has impact on staff, not knowing whether the current mayor is going to continue in her role, or whether there's going to be a change in mayor. But I would let the town manager speak to whether there's a transition notice needed for staff. But other than that, I don't foresee this being a problem on this issue.
Todd, you see a problem there?
Okay, so then how is it, Teresa, how is it being left?
So I would just put a big X on the comment, the margin note in a little box on the side, and we're going to leave it exactly like it is. So we have not addressed this odd problem with the term of the mayor for the coming term, and we're agreeing that you'll address it when the time comes, and you'll do it by making a rule change to suspend the rule, which doesn't actually change your rule, it just suspends it and allows you to do something different than what is happening in the rule.
And just a question, I guess, that's appropriate. So would that happen in November or December then? Would we look at that in the next three
This would
meetings?
be at the next meeting. If you leave the rules the same, that means we deal with
November
this in the
7th.
next meeting, right?
I'm just- yeah, okay.
And the next meeting, we would reorganize.
But you were leaving it out, so it's not a drafting issue. You don't have to decide it tonight in order to move this forward for the next meeting. So I guess the benefit, if you see that it is a benefit, would be that you don't have to decide tonight, that we don't have to draft language to implement it, and we don't have to necessarily define what the legislature is monkeying with currently. But you would need to come forward with this at the next meeting, I guess.
Okay, there are a bunch of items in here. Did you have anything else you wanted
I
to bring up?
didn't, sorry, that's all I got.
Oh,
Okay.
I just had a typo on something.
I think you
Okay,
guys
well,
did a
you-
good job with this, by the way.
Yeah, while you're looking for the typo, Bob, did you have anything?
I think it looks great.
Okay, I had a few things.
I think Jim's trying to say something.
Go ahead.
Oh, Jim, sorry.
I just,
I thought you already spoke. No?
I did, I'm sort of going page
Okay.
by page. 7.4. Is there any way we can put in here that we want PDFs delivered to council members for, of engineering drawings?
Make it a lot more
That's-
generic than PDF, but. if
Yeah,
you wanna
that's a
have
little
electronic-
specific, but I would love that as an informal policy.
And if necessary, email it as a separate attachment to each council person, and you can put a header on it that it's confidential, not for distribution, whatever you need. And
So would it be fair to say electronic copy of
Yes.
engineering documents or plans?
Yes.
Yes, but we don't want to add the language in 7.4. We just simply are requesting that it be done.
Oh, okay, okay.
Right?
Got it.
Right.
Noted.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, we still need to discuss the contracts and dollar amount and so on.
Which
You can ask your
number is
question.
that again?
That'd be 8.3.
Okay, 8.3.
Are you thinking in terms of dollar amount or duration of the contract?
I think both. I think we're still working on it, just trying to see what some of my cohorts do in the cities and towns in Marin County. But to have, if council is comfortable with that, a little bit of discretion. Again, it's still something that, will go before council as information, but for the business of the town, to allow some flexibility. Right now, it's unclear where the lines of discretion is necessarily for the town manager, and that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, what number was that?
8.3.
My 8.3 is different then.
Yeah, this doesn't talk about town manager approval of
Town attorney to
Town
Oh,
approve.
that's the
attorney
town
to
attorney
approve.
to
Right.
approve.
Where's the thing that Jim
Because
was
it's not
talking
in
about
here,
with
right?
contract?
We don't have that in here. But that's a
It's
different
somewhere
thing
else.
we've been talking about.
It's not in this, this is just town
Okay.
council.
Well,
Yeah, I'm sorry, merged, but that's something we'll be, sorry, I'm merging the two. It's all coming the same to me. It'll be a separate item that'll be coming before council probably at the next two
Okay.
meetings. I'm sorry about that. This one is specific just to the town attorney. And again, just allowing a little bit of flexibility between the town attorney and the town manager to make sure we're both comfortable on what should be going before the town attorney and, you know, and possibly using the risk pool and what types of items can just be reviewed and approved by the town manager. And again, our thought would be obviously all ordinances would be approved by the town attorney, but allowing some flexibility on certain resolutions, certain types of contracts. Again, there will be a review of the contracts. It's just, do we use the risk pool or do we use our town attorney?
okay.
And if you're comfortable, we'll put some language together between us and have that ready to go at the next meeting.
Those are my questions for now.
Okay, I've got a few. Yes? Oh, you do too? Do you mind if I do mine, since I haven't had a chance to talk yet? Okay. 3.3. Do we, I'm not particularly thrilled about having to take a vote every 30 minutes to extend the time. Would the council be willing to have votes every hour?
I don't mind the
Well, that
30-minute
I'd
thing,
say-
Diane, only because, like, we're trying to make a concerted effort to not make the meetings as long as we can, and it makes it harder on us. It's such a pain in the rear to try to vote every 30 minutes. It'll be a sort of an artificial disincentive to do so.
I agree with Sloan. I think that's a really good point.
Jim?
I agree, but also you could say, can we extend this for an hour and suspend the rules, right? Or, and if we unanimously agree, we're done. Is that true? Okay.
Then if I'm really serious, I will ask for the vote for an hour and to suspend the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think we extend each other enough professional courtesy. If any of us really wanted to do virtually anything in terms of timing, I think the rest of us would go along with it.
Well, most of us extend courtesy, except when you're criticizing the mayor earlier.
It's a generic, we are not the specific one.
All right, we will stick with the 30 minutes. Let's see. 4.4B, there was a question in the comment from you, Teresa. Is this the intent? If not, what type of resolution is this? Other resolutions require only a majority of those voting. But affirmative votes of at least 3 council members is a majority. So I don't even understand why this paragraph is necessary.
Well, what if you only had 3 council members here? Because 2 were conflicted out, or they weren't here for some reason?
Oh, got it.
I'm making that
This
up, Diane.
speaks-
I have no
No,
idea.
this speaks to whether you're talking about the majority of those here or the majority of the full composition.
Okay.
What was drafted here was unclear to me. There was something missing. It said resolutions and orders for the payment of money. And I was assuming this meant resolutions approving orders for the payment of money shall require the affirmative votes of at least 3 council members. So if you only have 3 council members here, you would need all 3 votes in order to approve those things.
Okay.
For other things, it would be only 2 votes if you had 3 council members here.
Okay, but an urgency ordinance requires 4.
Urgency ordinance always requires 4.
Okay.
So if you only have 3 council members here, you wouldn't be able to adopt an
All right.
urgency ordinance.
Okay, got it. Everybody good with that one? All right. And then,
Bless you.
11. The reason I was kind of considering proposing that we have something added with regard to expected, a certain level of decorum, respect, working on behalf of the town's best interests, et cetera, you know, on behalf of each of the, or by each of the council members. Something like that is not anywhere in this document, nor is the ability to censure a council member should there be some egregious violation of one of our policies or confidentiality or something else. I don't foresee ever having to do anything like that with any of us up here. I honestly, truly believe that. I think we all do the best for the town. We all, you know, do our best in all the meetings. However, occasionally something might come up. You know, we've seen it in other councils in Marin, and we've certainly read about it across the country. Every once in a while, there's a bad city council member that, you know, has done something. So I just wonder if that's something we would want to add in here. For instance, I looked at the City of Novato's policies and procedures, and they have a whole section. It's a little long, but there were maybe 2 little paragraphs that I thought could just kind of, you know, apply, you know, and inform the council members that we are expecting a certain level of, you know, like I said, decorum, respect, you know, lawful behavior. And if not, there is some kind of a procedure perhaps for a censor.
So it sounds like you are looking for a code of conduct / code of ethics for council members, plus a censure, an abbreviated censure procedure.
Yes, but brief. We're not going to get into details.
I think what we're looking for is probably a little bit different than that. That sounds fine by me, but I think what we want is options to discipline ourselves. That's what we want, right? It doesn't make sense to, like, if somebody does something bananas, what, this is pure ignorance, it's not rhetorical, what sorts of things do other councils enable themselves to be able to do? Could we, like, instruct one of us to, like, you know, stop talking or something? Do we have any authority to, like, you know what I mean? Censure sounds like a letter, right? Is that what it sounds? Okay. Is that the biggest action that any town council ever would take amongst itself to one of its members? Have you ever heard of anything? Is that what people do?
The biggest hammer you have is a censure from among yourself.
Which is a written directive, you screwed up.
Or oral. You can vote to censure someone. You could do it
But there's no
orally.
consequence other than it now appears in
It's
some
out there.
amorphous way. Okay.
Yeah, but essentially, the council can't kick out a councilman, an elected official. You don't have
Right.
the power to remove an elected official
Right.
from office.
That would be the ultimate
If it
one.
were an appointed member of a commission, you would have the power to remove the council has the power to remove a commissioner if the council thinks that behavior was not appropriate. It could remove a commissioner for any reason, but you can't remove one of your own.
Is it a bad idea for councils to have not the removal, to have for example, Diane's idea about having the right to censure ourselves? Is that typical and normal in town councils?
Some do and some don't. I think it's generally considered to be something that is only undertaken for a fairly egregious circumstance. You can see how, I'm not suggesting this council would do that, but how it could be used for political motives. And so that is not really the reason that most councils would go there. And so it really needs to be some relatively clear, egregious violation of policies or rules or really egregious behavior, not based on a position that a person took, but but a violation of rules or failure to perform duties on a consistent basis without being excused, that kind of behavior.
Does having this option, in your observation, lend to more rancor, or is it a way to nip in the bud when there's a problem?
I think I think it certainly could be abused. I would certainly not recommend that it be used to over things that are not clearly egregious, willful, and extreme. In terms of someone talking out of order, Robert's rules and Rosenberg's rules provide a mechanism for the chair to address a council member who is talking out of order. That's not a censure, that's just calling them out of order. And so if that's the concern, that a council member just got perhaps a little excited about something and was speaking out of order, that's within the power and an appropriate function of the chair, and it doesn't require a censure. Censure would be something more than that.
Would
Pretty
we I'm sorry,
egregious.
could I have one more question? Would we have to have it in our rules to do it? Let's say just randomly, one of us wanted to censure somebody else. I'm not giving you any ideas, Carla.
I would say,
Then, well, like, do you have to have it in the rules, or?
you don't have to have it in the rules. I would suggest that you adopt a rule before you do it, so that there is some orderly process. There's a minimum amount of notice that the person would need to get. It's not full-on due process. It's not a hearing. It's not
Oh, you
right
can't,
of
even if it's in the rules, you
cross-examination.
can't just like, boom, I move we censure Sloan.
They would need to have some
I see.
minimum notice that this is coming, so they have an
Sounds
opportunity to
complex.
respond.
We can leave it out, but I do think mention of, expectations, working on the town's behalf, not against your own personal, preferences or what have you, level of decorum. Well,
I'm not against it. I'm sorry, I hadn't thought it through.
all right. If nobody else cares, I'll leave it out, but I did notice at least Novato had quite a lengthy section on that. Jim?
I'd like to talk about 7.2, changes in the order of business. I know in the past, when we've had particular items come up and you look out and the chairs are full of people who want to talk about that item, the mayor has used his or her discretion to shift it earlier in the meeting. The way this rule's written, I'm not certain if it's going to be something being shifted forward, but we know it's going to be, a multi-hour discussion. I'm not certain if that would be allowed under this rule.
We can draft this so that it's within the discretion of the presiding officer to shift things around as appropriate.
If I may, that seems superfluous to me either way. My understanding is one of the very few things I recall from Robert's Rules of Order, and I assume it's the same under Rosenberg's, is that one of the, rights that the mayor enjoys is to, at the beginning of a meeting, reorder the agenda any way she likes.
So watch out.
And so,
That's true. This rule limits that, and so these rules trump Robert.
This limits it?
A little bit.
Because the word short?
No, but if you want to, I don't think so, Teresa, because although the mayor can reorder the agenda any way she wants, she has to get, needs to do it and then say, may I have a motion approving that? And so it
Then
strikes
you're
me as the
trumped.
same thing.
Then you're trumped. You're right. So as with all of these rules, you can move to suspend, or you can take a motion which has the effect of suspending. I don't know that this rule, you even need to have this rule. We could cross it out. If you like to have it in there, it's to tell the world that that can be done, that the mayor may move items around. I believe your agenda has that notice on there. Doesn't your agenda say items may be moved? It doesn't. That may be something to add to your agendas, just to alert the public, not to rely on the, if
So-
I'm the last one at the agenda, I'll just wait until 8 PM or 9 PM to show up.
Okay, so can we
Should we,
modify your write-up so that when we hit the, if linking discussions are expected, then period, full stop, and delete the rest of that sentence?
I say we don't even get that specific. We just say, the presiding official may change the order of business
Period.
to facilitate,
Better.
Oh, sure, to otherwise facilitate the conduct of, sure,
yeah, just to facilitate
the conduct of the meeting,
the conduct of the meeting.
period.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Good catch. Okay, Carla, did you have something?
Yeah, I just said one. I can't find the one typo. There's somewhere in here, there's a Y all by itself. I did have a question. If we could just simplify this, this phrase. It's on page 19, 8.8. In the edition that starts every member of the council. The sentence, if the council member recuses because he or she is interested in a question such that a conflict of interest may arise, that member shall not be counted as part of the quorum and shall not vote, da-da-da-da-da. Can't we just simply say, if a council member recuses because there might be a possible conflict of interest, that member shall not be counted as part of the quorum?
Absolutely. I would say this is a paragraph that was moved from another place. I don't think there were any changes made, and I couldn't agree with you more that it is not written in a very concise fashion. So we can simplify this so that it
Thank you.
is probably incredibly short.
Thank you very much.
All right, any others?
Well, I have a
Jim.
general question. Somewhere here, I'm under the impression that it's, if somebody recuses himself but but is legally required to be there, and I'm trying to understand.
If you have a conflict, then it's as if you're absent, and you probably need to leave the room, although perhaps
Okay.
you stay to make public comment, but you probably need to leave the room otherwise.
All right.
If you are, for example, abstaining because it's approval of the minutes, you weren't there, you didn't watch the tape, you have no basis to vote on it, you would still be counted. You would just be counted as here, you'd count towards the quorum, but you would not be part of, you would be counted as having recused yourself.
Okay.
Or
And
abstained.
what happens if the recusing party is just enough to get us to a legal quorum? What would,
So depending on what the situation is, you may have to not be able to act on that at that meeting. If you had 3 council members, all of whom had a conflict of interest under FPPC rules, for example, so those only left with 2, there is a procedure under the FPPC rules that is a straw drawing event where we bring in back enough council members to get to the bare minimum necessary to act, and it's essentially a rule of necessity. And so in that instance, you would end up with 1 council member who would otherwise have a conflict actually hearing the matter and voting, because otherwise you would never have enough. But that's not going to occur in a situation where, if you could just kick it till the next week, then you would end up with an appropriate quorum because perhaps someone was homesick.
okay.
That's one I haven't had to go through before the straw drawing. And it is not a who has the least conflict analysis. It is, if you have a conflict, you have a conflict, and then we draw straws and bring whoever back in, even if that is the person that feels like they have the biggest conflict.
Could they then abstain when the vote came up, or what would?
They would need to proceed.
nay,
They would
okay.
need to proceed, because at that point, there's a legal necessity that we have no ability to move forward on an item that we need to move forward on. But there are state law rules that govern that situation.
Okay.
Anything else, or can we move on? All right. Real quick, anybody agree with me on adding something about kind of a very brief code of conduct for council members, maybe with or without allowing for the censor?
I don't object to it at all, Diane.
Either?
There was-
Censor or conduct?
Right, whatever you
Okay.
like.
Wasn't there one in our original?
Nope. How about you
I'm
two?
okay with it if you want to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Carly,
What?
you all right with adding a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
something?
I thought,
Doesn't
I
have to
just
be
thought it was
involved.
already there.
Take a look at Novato's, just as,
We can bring that forward, and then if you don't like the way it looks, we can remove it or tinker with it.
do you have enough information? This was simply review and discussion.
You know, I'm just wondering if that isn't already included, because this is new, if that's in Rosenberg's rules. That contact.
Rosenberg's doesn't address censure.
No, I'm not talking about censure.
Just a general code of conduct, code of ethics?
Yeah.
I'm going to check right now. My recollection is that what's in Rosenberg's speaks to more the order and speaking out of order and not speaking out of order, as opposed to a broader code of conduct and ethics that talks more about how you treat your colleagues generally, or your staff generally, or the public generally. Rosenberg's, I think, is more focused on order and how the meeting proceeds, and not, and respecting the role of the chair and the decisions of the chair. But let me look.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got people in the audience. Can we move on to the next agenda item, and can you two maybe have that discussion about Rosenberg's offline? Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay, is that okay, Carla?
Oh, yeah, it was just that I thought there might be one that's already,
And if there
place.
is, then great.
Oh, you
the
the rules of order are meant to, may I just proceed? The rules of order are meant to create an atmosphere where the members of the body and the members of the public can attend to business efficiently, fairly, and with full participation. At the same time, it is up to the chair and the members of the body to maintain common courtesy and decorum. Unless the setting is very informal, it is best for only one person at a time to have the floor, and it is always best for every speaker to be first recognized by the chair before proceeding to speak. The chair should always ensure that debate and discussion of an agenda item focuses on the item and the policy in question, not the personalities of the members of the body. Debate on policy is healthy, debate on personalities is not. The chair has the right to cut off discussion that is too personal, is too loud, or is too crude. And then it goes on to talk about limiting time. And then it talks about mechanisms for calling folks out of order in that context. I believe there are other broader codes of conduct. I have not looked at Novato's in particular, but I suspect that goes a little further than what Robert's rules, or Rosenberg's rules, excuse me, provides.
Okay?
yeah.
All right, great. Let's move on. Let's see. Agenda item 6.4, discussion and update on Planning Commission Design Review Guidelines. Adam Wolf, Director of Planning and Building.
Hello again. This is intended to be a pretty brief just update on where things stand. I know there was some discussion at, I think a couple of months ago at the Town Council meeting regarding design guidelines. The Planning Commission did take up the issue, or I shouldn't call it an issue, a discussion of design guidelines, and the importance of design guidelines and what to do about maybe moving forward with developing design guidelines for more formal adoption. At their August 22nd Planning Commission meeting. There was a good discussion about what they are, what design guidelines are, and sort of the benefits that they could potentially provide the town. We also talked about existing design guidelines that already have been adopted by the town for various parts and portions of town, such as Christmas Tree Hill, San Clemente Place, and in general, there are some design guidelines in our code. But at the meeting, the chair, Chairman Chase, did appoint a subcommittee consisting of himself and Vice Chair Metcalf to more fully, to work in a more directed way through the on the development of some draft guidelines and perhaps some elements of good design that would then come back to the commission for further discussion. So the intention is to work through the commission. All of the commissioners did comment that they thought it would be valuable time spent. Some focused a little bit more on the need for commercial design guidelines versus residential design guidelines. Obviously, there's minutes available and the video of that tape, but in any case, they decided that it was worthwhile to pursue that, and the next step would be to come back with some draft concepts, guidelines, things to discuss with the rest of the commission and the public to get public input on that aspect of sort of work through the process and a public process through the commission, ultimately think with the end result at some point down the line to present those as recommendations to the council.
Thank you. Any questions? Jim?
Yeah. In terms of coming up with the guidelines, are we going to be able to offer any carrots to people who follow the guidelines versus, people who just come in and say, hey, here's your objective standards, I've met them, please approve my project. And let me give you maybe a crazy hypothetical. If in the flood-prone areas, if the guidelines say we encourage people to have the living space above the 11-foot elevation, okay, would we be willing to, not count part of the garage against FAR or something like that? Just sort of.
I mean, the intent from the commission was really intended to focus on the design aspects, not get into development standards and so on. So it's really a physical appearance approach. And I think there will be a fundamental question about whether these sort of fit within sort of the findings that already exist in for design review, for example. And so they sort of bring forth and highlight the consideration and the criteria on which those findings are going to be met, or they exist sort of as a separate document that ultimately is a requirement, sort of like there's a new finding that says these, in order to approve a design review project, you have to also find that these design guidelines are met, or a project meets these design guidelines. So that would be a more involved process where you have obviously a zoning ordinance amendment. So that's yet to be determined. But I think it's more going to be that, and we sort of included examples, and Vice Chair Metcalf brought forth many examples. Commissioner Chase also had some. I provided some examples of how other communities have done it, and it runs, you can do very involved, lengthy time-consuming processes, some more informal ways of getting to the same end result, and I think we're going to have that discussion ultimately where we want to land. But it's more of a, it doesn't take discretion. It's not intended to replace development standards or zoning code, which may get into FAR or whatnot. It's really about expectations for design quality that, from staff's perspective, I think one of the great benefits would be to consolidate it in one place, highlight that as a important value, let people know coming into the process that we have something that talks to the expectations for design. So it's on that level is really where the discussion that the commission had anyways, that was their desire in moving this forward and thinking at this point in time. Obviously, things can change, and we'll all hear from the public and others, but hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah. I know we've been anticipating seeing this for a long time, that they've been, I guess they offered before to do this exercise for design guidelines. There was a document years ago that was pretty good, but it somehow vanished from the downstairs. So anyways, I think it's really good. Please express to them my appreciation. And I think it would be really good for the council to have the opportunity to review them, but also to become familiar with them, because in the case of appeals, it's going to be essential that we know what those guidelines are.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any member of the public like to speak to this item? Seeing none? No other comments? Thank you very much. All right, that is it for business items. Let's move on to town manager and council reports. Todd?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Two quick comments regarding open session comments tonight. Patty asked about our emergency warning system in Marin. On any event, we learn from them, and it's, lessons learned, and we take it and we look at it as a county of how we can do things better. The first evolution of that, and the most important one, was the Oakland fires. Put a lot of things in place after the Oakland fires, and it's a big reason why we have our emergency radio system today. Moving forward, and I think Corte Madera has always been a little bit in the county ahead of the game on this conversation, but there's always room for improvement. It's the emergency notification system. So Napa, Mendocino County, and Sonoma County all have different variations of this. Some are what you hear is the 911 reverse system. Some use Nixle alerts. Some use other types of notification. Mendocino County did a really good job. They were actually, their community received the notifications that worked perfectly. Napa had some similar positive comments and critiques. There's some discussion going on in Santa Rosa on what happened, because as the fire jumped and it went through Fountain Grove, came through where the two hospitals are, Sutter and Kaiser, and then jumped the highway, which I never thought would be possible, and how fast moving that fire was. They really were caught off guard. And there's some, right now it's going to be our lessons learned. Do they have the right system in place? Do they have the right personnel in place to act immediately in something like this, to put out those notifications? Because at a certain period of time, it looks like the notifications weren't sent out. And so we're going to look at that. You can always do things better. Specifically to us, there's been a lot of conversation over the siren or how we're set up. And so how we're set up, it's called Alert Marin. And so it's going to come out in our newsletter. Rebecca and Lorena have been working on this, and we're going to point people to our disaster preparedness page, and it has all this information on there, so go to it. But it's called Alert Marin, and so Alert Marin is set up on all the landlines. So whether you have a registered number or not, if it's a block number, it automatically, through the 911 reverse directory, the telephone companies, it's already inputted and updated every month into the system. So it's a monthly update. Also, what's important for our public to know, you can also get text, email, and more importantly, cell phone calls, but you have to register. And so that's really important because your system's only as good as the information you have. And so whether it's cell or landline, you have that. That's our early warning system. And so we have someone on call or on duty 24/7 in Marin. And so if an event happened and we had a fire, heaven forbid, on our hillside, what would happen is they would automatically tie into the Emergency Operations Center for Marin County. And there's someone specific that has a laptop computer, and they automatically, what's going on, what are the conditions? We need to alert this geographic location in this order, from north to south or east to west. You can hit 10 to 20,000 phone calls in a matter of minutes. And so you hit a specific message, you point them to a certain, whatever you want them to do, evacuate, and then you point them to information they need to go once they evacuate. So that's seconds to minutes that we can notify someone immediately. And so that is in place for us right now, and it's specific to fires. Specific to fires because, again, in the first few minutes you have to alert someone. And the intent and the hope is that before fire can devastate our infrastructure, cell towers or landlines, that it's still in place where you can hit that urgent early warning system. The other conversation that we've had a siren and we've gone away from it because the siren, as it relates to fires in the past, it's really technology related. 60% of the time, we wouldn't have someone in place to hit the button to alert that siren. Saturdays and Sundays, our fire personnel could potentially be out of the office, and that has to be 90+% available to us in an early warning situation with fires. We've been working with our neighborhood response team. Bob Ravazio has been helping us as well from the disaster preparedness side. We're looking at technology that allows us to activate that siren anywhere, kind of taking the same philosophy we have at the county EOC and incorporating it into our town. And so we continue that conversation moving forward, but we do have something in place, and it's important that people in our town go to our website to make sure that they are registered. The more phones that you have registered, the better we are, so just don't depend on landline or cell. Register all your numbers. Moving forward, we're doing something very unique in our community that I'm proud of, and again, Bob has been spearheading that. Again, we have, I believe, how many neighborhood response teams now? 19?
Yeah, we got 6 more starting up right now.
It's impressive.
Interest level's high, which is good.
So it's impressive. And so what we're doing, each area has a unique kind of geographic situation. So what we did is we have police and fire, the admin team for the town, council as part of it, and then the neighborhood core team. And what we're going to start doing, and we're going to start with Chapman Park and Christmas Tree Hill, and we're going to start to do tabletop exercises to talk about, okay, what are the needs that you have? What are the resources available? How do we operate? How are you going to react? And then see if we have everything that we need and start to build that education on both sides. And when we get through this process with all of our groups, then to reestablish and say, where are we falling short? And to have a report publicly to council. The siren in its current state isn't something I'm comfortable as a redundancy when it's like 40% accurate, but I think the siren definitely has merit to discussion, and so I'm tasked with following up on that, and I will. But currently we are positioned, but what happened, it was very scary in Sonoma County. I'll just jump into that real quick. Luckily for our town staff, we had 5 to 8 employees that were affected by mandatory evacuations. Luckily, no one lost their house or had their house damaged. No one was injured. Really proud of our police and fire. 70 to 75% of our people live in Sonoma County and Napa, and were affected by these fires, and it was a very unique situation. Normally, we go down south. Well, this time the firestorms were in our backyard, in our neighborhoods. And how they both reacted was just commend them very much and very impressed with how they handled themselves. We had 3 engines and 10 firefighters Monday morning all the way through the week. They didn't sleep for the first 3 days. They were out there and protecting their neighborhoods and helping our friends in Sonoma County. Police sent a contingent of 4 officers starting Monday all the way until now on 12-hour shifts and rotated them through. And so just very commendable. Very impressed with their response, and we hope that, you know, when it's our time, you know, that we'll have our friends in Sonoma and Napa County supporting us. So very scary. Also, Mr. Merritt, I sent him a message during open time when he commented on the concerns on Paradise Drive. I know this is a big issue for him. It's the second time he's come before council, and he has discussed his concerns with staff over the last year. And so I'm going to get with staff, and I let him know that tonight. I'll follow up with him this week and just make sure he, instead of giving him the 12 to 18 months like I did, I'll give him a specific timeline of where we're at. So I know that's important. Also, we've been getting a lot of positive comments with our newsletter. Lorraine has been doing a great job with the help of Rebecca. We've gotten some great feedback, but people are asking, hey, we want to know your staff, you know, like your department heads give recommendations on reports, you know, and so we'd like to know some background on them. Who are they? Give us a picture and tell us something about them. Show us some pictures of our maintenance staff, you know, our team that keeps the town looking so great. And so we're going to start to do something on a monthly basis highlighting different areas of our town staff. And so I really appreciate that from members of the community. And also, we have a drive up and a donate event this Wednesday at the Village Shopping Center. It's being sponsored by Senator McGuire, the Press Democrat, and Redwood Credit Union to help those survivors devastated by the North Bay fires. And so I believe they'll be out there at 4 p.m. It's on our website. We did send out alerts to the community advising them of that. And just lastly, some good news. It looks like we won one, but the governor vetoed Senate Bill 649, and as most of you know, this is the legislation that tried to scale back or eliminate our local control over the permitting process on small cellular cell antenna towers and related to wireless equipment in our right-of-way. And a lot of those areas could have been in our residential zones. And so thank you, Governor, for vetoing that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I just had one very quick comment. I cannot hear the siren from my home, so don't forget that the sirens cannot be heard at every residence in the town. So that's precisely why that can't be the first line of notification.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And you just, if I could, just one other thing of my concern about the siren, and it has to do with the education as well, that whenever we bring out whatever we're going to do, that we have to make sure that our community is 100% educated, because when that siren was tested in the past, we thought our education was good. It shuts down our emergency 911 system because you get so many 911 calls. And so again, it's just we want to roll it out the right way, and like you said, Madam Mayor, make sure that we cover the appropriate parts of town.
So we need
Thank you.
2 sirens, one for the other fire station and one for...
We have 2.
And you can't hear that? From the one
I'm
there?
kind of, there's a hill sort of that blocks me a little bit. I mean, if I'm outside and it's quiet and I'm listening, I can hear it. But inside the house, I can't. If I'm in the backyard, I don't think I can.
Okay.
So. All right. Council member reports. Bob?
Yes, maybe the newsletter is a good place this week to put in and remind people to sign up for emergency notification and get that in there. I just want to thank Todd and Mario. I got a call last week in the middle of the week at the height of the fires from a friend of mine who was organizing a drive to try to get 70 beds together. They were housing firefighters at the seminary, and they needed places for them to sleep, so they were looking for cots and blankets, and I remember that the town had some. I called Todd. He picked up the phone immediately. Mentioned later, by the way, that he had 21 members of his family staying in the house with him who had been evacuated because of the fires. But immediately got hold of Mario, and within minutes, we had 35 cots and blankets shipped down to the seminary to house firefighters. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for Mario, and thanks for picking up your phone when you were dealing with your own issues. That's
Thank
it.
you. Jim?
Well, I was going to mention something about the Marin Telecommunications Agency. Todd already mentioned it. It was the sighting of the cell phone towers. So.
Thank you. Fun.
Yes, I deferred reporting on the legislative committee for the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members. I'll be very brief, but I thought you might be curious to hear a couple things. One thing that, our county towns band together do is we have these professional lobbyists or legislators who sort of watch what the legislators do. Their names are, the company's called Emmanuel Jones in Sacramento, and they report about what the legislator's doing. And what they reported on as being the big issues for this coming year, for the big push, they say, for the next session will be, generally, our legislators will be resisting the federal government. That's like what they're focused on. Trying to locate taxes to fund disadvantaged communities. And thirdly, the unions apparently are going to be working very hard to try to prohibit local governments from contracting out. I don't think we've seen the last of 649. Okay. Our League of California Cities reported about the biggest thing that happened this last legislative session. As you all know probably better than I, was Senate Bill number 1 about the funding for the 580 interchange and other things. That was a huge win. I thought, wait, 649 was the cell phone towers thing, is that right? I'm sorry, I misspoke then. There was a bill in front of our, which would have, 1250, I think, that would have limited the contracting ability of towns. And I think we can expect that to come back up. Assemblymember Mark Levine either comes himself or sends a staff member. The staff member pointed out that he's still focused on infrastructure bills and something to do with CalPERS. And Senator McGuire, I misspoke at our last session and said that it was Jared Huffman. I don't know why I had that mistake. It was Senator McGuire who came and spoke to us at length. He's dynamite on behalf of our county and does all kinds of great things for us. If anybody's interested, I can give it in detail. Suffice it to say, I've really become a big fan of his. I think he does just a great job for us in about 1,000 different ways. He's boundless energy, optimistic, and appears well regarded. So that is my basic report. I'm happy to give it in more detail if anybody would like to reach out to me. SloanCBailey@yahoo.com. Thank you.
And don't forget that Mike McGuire will be at the
yeah.
Village
Stay.
tomorrow at 4 to 6, is it? For drop-offs for contributions for the Sonoma and Napa fire victims. Carolyn.
Okay. Couple of things. First of all, tomorrow, Wednesday, it's the third Wednesday of the month, the day of this speaker series that is sponsored by Park and Rec, Age-Friendly Corte Madera, and the Twin Cities Village. And it's open to everybody. The topic should be really interesting and good, so that none of our children or people that follow us or after our demise have horrible memories of us. It is a program on how to get rid of all your junk in your house. Go through and sift through papers, only keep what you need, and there will be somebody that will be speaking on how you can really do this very easily and doably, but it will make everyone that you leave behind love you that much more. So that is tomorrow at 1 to 2:30 at the Central Marin Police Authority Community Room. And so I encourage anyone that has the time and that's interested in what people after you think of you to attend that. Then the other thing I'll just pass around because we were talking about it. Here we go. I didn't protest in the 60s at Berkeley, but I took this picture, but I was amongst the crowd that yelled, 649 is over the line, and on the Capitol steps in Sacramento. And the League of California Cities, it was on their yearly conference. And so I think there were about 300 or 400 of us that went out there, and it was really a kick, and we were really relieved when we saw some aides of people that really counted, and that we're hoping that this contributed to the governor's veto. Because when it first started, the first vote took place, there was zero opposition. And so it was really a long pull for several months, and thanks to the legislative committee that followed up on that too.
We wrote a very clear letter, strongly worded our dissent.
It was that letter and our demonstration that probably did it. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
I went to a bunch of meetings. I'll just mention a couple of them. Coffee with the Cop at Starbucks was really fun.
Oh.
I think they're going to do it now every few months, and they're going to rotate, so.
Is it always Mike or somebody different?
Well, it's Mike, but there were a few others there, too. Grady was there, and I forget who else was there. But anyways, a couple of guys from the CHP showed up.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and Margot, the public information officer for Central Marin Police Authority, actually got to put on an apron and make the lattes behind the counter at Starbucks, so that was kind of fun. So anyway, if you get a chance, it's actually kind of a fun get-together. Members from the community come, so it's a good time. Sephora is now open. We did a little ribbon cutting at the at Town Center for Sephora. Oktoberfest was wonderful on Saturday, and I can't believe the air was almost completely clear for Oktoberfest. Couldn't have asked for better weather. So I certainly hope that the fundraising by the Beautification Committee was a success. I was a little nervous about that, considering the smoke we had all week. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that there is a program coming up called Living with Coyotes that will be held at the Mill Valley Library on October 24th at 7 p.m. if you are interested. Again, Living with Coyotes, October 24th, Mill Valley Library in the Creekside Room, 7 p.m. If there's nothing else that anybody wants to add?
You know, Diane, thank you for mentioning that Oktoberfest. We should formally thank the Beautification Committee and the Lions Club for putting on this thing that has really become something that many of us, including myself, look forward to every year, and that is benefits, those hanging flower baskets, and it's a good community spirit, and it's just nice all around. So thank you to both of them.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 8.1, review of draft agenda for the November 7th Town Council meeting. Todd, anything you want to mention?
Under business items, again, we have the study session on the noise ordinance update and leaf blower regulations, and the thought would be to have a quick, I shouldn't say quick, a conversation about best practices and maybe a menu of options that the community and council is interested in staff researching and bringing back to the council at a future meeting. But again, I want to meet with staff tomorrow morning just to see timing-wise of the Montessori. We have a couple projects coming our way. We only have a couple council meetings left on this side of the year. Again, Restoration Hardware is potentially in the December range, January range. Montessori may be ready to come back on November 7th or the first meeting in December. And so I just need to work through that with staff tomorrow. And I'd like to separate those two items if I could on the council meetings. But right now, tentatively, I have the noise ordinance, but again, Montessori and the noise ordinance may flip-flop. Also, thank you again for holding the retreat and taking 4.5 hours of your day to help staff. I got a lot out of it, so I really appreciate that. I plan on giving a summary report for the consent calendar at our next meeting, and so I will put that together and work with the mayor on that. Also, in talking to the mayor in a follow-up from the retreat, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, that you didn't have an opportunity to give your presentation to us, but in talking to the mayor, we had some discussion of placing as a business item at the next meeting a conversation about facilities in the community center and the intergenerational center. And so we'll work with the mayor and the vice mayor on that report.
Great,
if
thank
that works
you.
for everybody.
Thanks.
And if you have anything else, we'd be happy to add it to the agenda. What do you think? What else? Rules and regs? Oh. Any direction on when you would like to bring the mayor conversation to the agenda, the November 7th meeting, or I guess it would be December?
When does it have to be figured out?
It's usually in November.
Well, we usually pick the mayor first meeting in December. So if we're going to do any change to that due to this funny, not funny mayor, but
You know what I meant.
funny term.
Yes.
Yes. Then we'd need to bring it back at the next meeting, correct?
Yes, you're only having one meeting, yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind being, I don't fully understand what the options are. I heard what you were saying today. I couldn't focus on it. I wouldn't mind just explaining to me what we need to do at some point.
Well, customarily, I mean, this is how I'm viewing it. Customarily, the mayor, the term of mayor and vice mayor aligns with when new
Got it.
council members take their seat. So in our case, with the November election, it was always the first meeting in December. With June elections, it would presumably be the first meeting in July. So we've got this funny half year because the next election is in June. So do we align up and either extend the current term for mayor and vice mayor 6 months and just call it a day? Or do we go ahead and switch in December and have a 6-month term? Granted, next year we might have to realign anyway, but we're going to have so many changes going on over the next 18 months. I figure we'll figure out next year's changes next year's. And let's just figure out what we're going to do in December for the January to June term.
Okay. Let's set it.
So how do you want to do it?
You just put it on the agenda and then we just vote or something? Do we supposed to
Well,
discuss it?
do you want to extend, what do you want them to draft?
Can we talk about it now? Oh, okay.
That was
We could
next
draft
meeting.
nothing and just elect somebody for 12 months, realizing that in July, we might have some vacancies.
It sounds like perhaps we just need to flesh out what the options are and bring a staff report that outlines what the options are. You can have a discussion, and then we can, if you want to take action on that, we could draft it so that you could then take an action, which is to perhaps you would be bypassing your rules. You'd have to take a vote to do that. You then would have to take some action potentially to extend the term of the existing mayor or to allow the term of the existing mayor to expire and then extend the term of the new mayor, whoever that person is going to be, until July 1st. Or we could draft it in a way that it would align with what the state is doing.
I appreciate you explaining it to me. I just meant let's put it as an action item on the next agenda.
Okay. Or presumably it could be a 12-month term.
It could be a 12-month term. That's right.
Sure.
Your
Whatever.
existing rule has your changeover occur in December.
Great.
Okay, so it seems like there are 3 options that should be made clear on the staff report. Okay. Anything else? Any member of the public like to comment on that? Seeing none, that is the end of our regular open council meeting. We are now about to adjourn to closed session.
Did we approve the minutes? Did I miss that?
Yeah.
Consent
That
calendar.
was on
We
consent.
put them on the.
Right,
consent
that's right, good.
calendar.
All right, so adjourn to closed session.